Hi again, Mark here from talkingbass.net. This week I'm going to try and help you with one of the most common problems that both bass players and guitarists encounter, and that's playing in the key of E flat. Remember, as always, the lesson material is available to download by following the link below to talkingbass.net. If you're already watching at talkingbass.net, then just click on the big download button below, and while you're there, remember to check out all the other lessons over at the lesson map page. There's over 100 lessons, all categorized and systemized for ease of navigation. Then subscribe for free if you want to access all the exclusive bass resources and content. So, when I mention the key of E flat, you may be thinking to yourself, that's not a problem. I can just use my trusty old E flat major shape and I can just move it around the neck and play the E flat up here. And you can. No problem with that. But if I was to say to you, I want you to stay down here in the first 5 frets, you know, I don't want you to venture up here, none of that stuff, I just want it down here in this area, that might be a little more problematic. And it doesn't matter if it's E flat major, E flat dominant 7, E flat mixolydian, E flat Dorian, E flat minor 7 arpeggios, anything like that beginning with an E flat. The problem comes from the fact that the E flat is there, the first fret of the D string, and we don't have an E flat down here. You know, E is the lowest note on a 4-string bass. Obviously, if you've got a 5-string or a 6-string, then, you know, things are going to be a little bit different. And also, if you were to detune, you know, then completely different. But if you're just using a 4-string bass, just tuned E, A, D, G, then you're going to have this kind of problem. And you know, this is a common problem, because if you're playing around down here, you know, in this area, you don't necessarily want to be venturing up here just to take care of the E flat. You know, you want to be able to hit that E flat there and then just know all the notes available to you in this area, okay? So that's what we're going to be looking at. So the problem comes from the fact that we can find an E flat down here at the first fret of the D string, no problem. But because people get so caught up in the, you know, in this second finger shape for, let's say, a major scale, we can't really use that there. And people get so used to seeing the root note as the lowest note that they ascend from, when you're starting up here at the D string, you know, that's quite limiting. We've not really got many notes to use. And even if you did know a first finger major scale, like, we could play that there, but we run out of notes quite quickly. You know, it's not very useful. So we really need to be able to see the notes below the root note, you know, down here. You know, there's a lot of notes available to us there. So we don't really want to just be looking at this linear pattern moving up from the root note. We want to see all the notes of a particular chord or scale in that area, okay? So that's what we're going to look at. So the rest of this lesson is going to centre around an E flat 7 chord, or E flat dominant 7. I'm going to use that instead of, let's say, the major scale, major chords, minor chords, because it's a little bit more funky. You know, you've got that, you know, I've got that funkier sound there. So the riff's going to be a little bit cooler and a little bit bluesier. So even though I'm going to use the E flat 7 chord, and we're going to be using an E flat 7 arpeggio as the main basis for this, you can still just alter this slightly to accommodate anything like any scale, any arpeggio, you know, and I'll show you that at the end, how you can alter it just to accommodate whatever you're going to be using. But for now, it's going to be this E flat dominant 7 chord. So first of all, let's have a look at the notes of that chord. So that arpeggio, the E flat 7 arpeggio. Now normally, you would want to, you know, or would probably just go for the E flat 7 starting there, like I said, at the 6th fret of the A string, so that E flat there. And an E flat dominant 7 arpeggio, or chord, is basically a major arpeggio with a flattened 7th on top. So if we work through that, we've got E flat there, then we've got G, B flat, D flat, okay? So root, major 3rd, perfect 5th, and then the flat 7 or minor 7th up at the top. So in terms of the frets there for that, we've got the 6th fret of the A string, 5th fret of the D string, then the 8th fret of the D string, and then the 6th fret of the G string, and then we can put the octave up on there too. So that's the E flat 7 arpeggio. Now, obviously, that's not going to be that useful to us down here because we're starting on the first finger. So what we need to do is have a look at a first finger arpeggio for it, first of all, just to get that under our fingers. So we can play that, starting at that 6th fret there of the A string, by starting with the first finger. So there's the E flat, but then if we want to play the G, we can play the G there at the 10th fret of the A string. So we've got this little stretch there for the major third, so that's root and third. Then we play the B flat in the same place, the 8th fret of the D string there, E, G, B flat, and then we can take the D flat up there on the G string again, and then play the octave. So that's the E flat dominant 7 starting on the first finger. You could also play that across 2 strings a little bit more easily, which will apply a lot more to that thing down there, by playing E flat, G, B flat, and then playing the 7th, the flattened 7th, there at the 11th fret of the D string. So this, you'll see what I mean. This is going to apply a little better when we move down here. So E flat, G, B flat, D flat. So 6th fret, 10th fret, 8th fret of the D string, and then 11th fret of the D string. And then we can put the octave on top if we want so. Oops. Okay, so that's the E flat 7 arpeggio starting on the first finger. So now all we've got to do is take that shape and then move it down to this E flat down here. So if we do that, we have the E flat there, 1st fret of the D string. Then we play the G here, 5th fret of the D string. So that's the root and the 3rd. Then we play the B flat there at the 3rd fret of the G string. So that's the major arpeggio, E flat, G and B flat. And then I can also play that 7th, the flattened 7th there, the D flat at the 6th fret of the G string. So altogether, E flat, G, B flat, D flat. Okay, so that's the E flat dominant 7 arpeggio there. I'm not moving up to the E flat because it means a position shift, but we can quite easily hit that flattened 7th there, okay? So, we're okay now working up from the root note. That's fine. We've got all the notes available to us there. So we could, if there was a chord playing there, E flat 7, we've got some notes. Okay, but now we need the notes below. So let's just work down from that E flat. So we've got the E flat, then we need the D flat, the 7th, which is there at the 4th fret of the A string. Then we can use the B flat there, the 1st fret of the A string, so that's the 5th. And then we work down to the G, the 3rd, which is at the 3rd fret of the E string. But obviously on a bass tuned like this, we can't get down to the E flat, so that's as low as we can go with that chord, okay? So E flat, D flat, B flat, G, natural. So that's the root, the flattened 7th, the 5th, and the 3rd. And that's all the notes of that E flat major, E flat 7 arpeggio. So they're the chord tones, all in that area. So, just to familiarise ourselves with that, we can work up from the root note up to the top, and then work down from the root note below, and back. So I'm always starting on the root note and finishing on the root note, just to, so we can get our bearings quite well. So you really want to play through that arpeggio a few times and really get that shape under your fingers. And that's it. That's all the notes of the E flat 7 arpeggio in that area. Okay, so you just want to play around with that and then just mess around with it. Just get a little bit creative. So start playing around with it, making up some riffs. Okay, just move around it. So now you've got those chord tones under your fingers in that area, we can start to have a look at the riff. And the riff is always going to be, or any riff is going to be good to in memorizing these kind of patterns, because it means that you're applying it. It's not just a boring arpeggio shape, just up and down, because that doesn't have any application as of itself. So whenever you learn anything like a scale pattern or an arpeggio pattern, try to come up with a riff, you know, just even if it's just of your own, just come up with something that helps to familiarize yourself with those patterns, because like I say, just playing up and down patterns isn't going to really be that useful. You really want to see it in application. So here's the riff. This is how it sounds. Okay, so I'll just run through the notes of the riff first, and then I'll do a little analysis just afterwards. So we start on the E flat, first fret of the D string, first finger, and then we slide up from the 4th fret to the 5th fret. So G flat to the G, and that's with the 4th finger. So 1st fret, 4th fret, 5th fret. Then we play the B flat, 3rd fret of the G string, and that's with the 1st finger. Then 5th fret of the G string, the C, and then we go back to the B flat, 3rd fret. Okay? Then we play the D flat there, 6th fret of the G string with the 4th finger. And then we can move down to the C again, 5th fret of the G string. And then back to the B flat, 3rd fret of the G string. And then to the C, 5th fret of the G string. So remember, this is all available in sheet music and tab in the download. Just follow the link below. So, and that's it. That's the first part. So we've got E flat, G flat, G, slide, B flat, C, back to the B flat, then D flat, C, B flat, C. Okay, so that's the first line. One little variation you can do on that is to come back to the B flat, as you'll see here. You can play it like this. After the D flat, back to the B flat. Okay, just putting it in there almost like a ghost note because it goes by quite quick. So it's just to give it a little more bounce. Without it, with it, oops. Okay, but that's the line. Now we move on to the second part of the riff, and to do this we just take that whole thing and take it down the octave, apart from the E flat obviously. So we begin on the E flat, first fret of the D string again, and then we just come down to the G flat, second fret of the E string, and then we play a hammer on to the 3rd fret of the E string, the G. So this is the same line as we played up there where we slid, but this time we're playing with the 2nd finger, hammer on to the 3rd finger. And then we can play the B flat, C, and back to the B flat. So then we've got the D flat, C, B flat, C. Okay, and like I say, it's all tabbed out in the download material. So start again, E flat, hammer on G flat to the G, B flat, C, B flat, D flat, C, B flat, C, and again you can put that B flat in there to, you know, come to give it that little bounce by playing it like this. after the D flat there. Without it. Okay, so either way is fine, just whichever one you prefer the sound of. So now we've got both of those lines, we just put them both together. So we begin with the top one, then move to the bottom one. Okay, so 2, 3, 4. Now let's have a closer look at the notes in that riff. So like I said earlier, we've got the standard E flat 7 arpeggio in there, the chord tones. But I've also included a couple of little scale notes, the 6th and the chromatic notes in there, the minor third to the major third, which you'll see here. So to begin with, we've got the E flat there, the root note, and then we immediately move into this little chromatic move, which is the minor third to the major third. So that's the G flat to the G. And this is a really, really important move to learn about because it gives us that real funky, bluesy kind of sound. And it's just, you know, so common in blues stuff. So you get that kind of, you know, that kind of line. That, even with bends, you know, you'll kind of get a, you know, that's the same kind of thing. It's that minor third, starting on a minor third, moving into the major third. There it is. And you just get it all the time in well, just lines in general, but it works particularly well over dominant 7 chords. So it should probably be a really familiar sound to your ear. So we've got the E flat, then the G flat to the G, then we've got the 5th. So that's a part of the arpeggio. And then I've included the 6th in there, the C, which is a little neighbour note there that we can move from the 5th and back to the 5th, and it gives us that's very much used in soul music and blues stuff. So you know, and again, that should be a pretty familiar sound to your ear. Then D flat, that's the flattened 7th in there, chord tone. Then back to the 6th, back to the 5th, and back up to the 6th. So that 6th in there is bridging the gap between the 5th and the flattened 7th, and it gives it a nice sound there. Okay, so like I say, very familiar sound. And obviously, second part of the line, exactly the same. Okay, so the main thing to take from this is obviously the chord tones, the arpeggio there, but learn to see, you know, once you can operate within that framework, you want to be able to see these things like the minor third to the major third, both high and low. You know, so if you were playing in an E flat there, someone says, okay, just make up an E flat groove, you know, over an E flat 7, you know, you could sit there. You know that there's that minor third to major third available to you there because you've played it already. Because if you're in that position and you're not familiar with these notes below there, that just probably wouldn't come to you. You might stumble across it accidentally, but you know. Okay, so coming from the root note down to that third, that's a nice little move. Okay, so another thing to remember with this, especially in getting used to coming down below the root note, is, you know, you've got the E flat there, the root note. As you come down through the arpeggio, if you look at it as 3 lines, you've got the D string line, the A string line, and the E string line. Got the root note there on the D string, obviously. On the A string, we've got the flattened 7th and the 5th. So, you know, try practicing just playing on those two strings to begin with, just with those 3 notes. You know, just practice with those, and then move down onto the E string. We've only got one note on the E string, it's the third, you know, that G there. So as soon as you've got used to playing between the D string and the A string, add in that G down there on the E string. You know, just bring it down there, come back up. Same thing above. You know, you've got your little major arpeggio shape there, then start to bring in the 7th. Then you can start to bring in that minor third to the major third move and start to bring in the 6th. Once you've nailed all that, you can start to bring in other scale tones. But remember, like I said, get used to the arpeggio first, because for a start there's less notes, so it's a little easier to remember, and also that is always going to be your framework that you're working from. You know, that's like the skeleton of the scale, let's say. Don't start with scales, start with arpeggios, and then add the scale notes and the chromatics in afterwards. Now, even though we've only looked at the E flat dominant 7 chord there, we can actually just make little changes to that to accommodate any other chord. So let's say that we were wanting to play over an E flat major 7 chord instead of the E flat dominant 7. All we've got to do is, especially if you know your chord construction rules, you just change the 7th, sharpen it to a D natural instead of a D flat. If we do that, so we've got the D natural there instead of the D flat, and when we come down, D natural there. Okay, so that gives us an E flat major 7. If we want an E flat minor 7, we just flatten the third. So that G natural that we had for the major third in the dominant 7 now becomes the G flat, the minor third. Okay, so that gives us all those chords. And if we wanted to, you know, we can use the same principle for the scales as well. So play through let's say a major scale. So we've got E flat major. Okay, so all the notes there, rather than just looking at the notes from the root note up. You know, if we want to look at the Mixolydian scale. Okay, so we just flatten that D flat there, flatten the 7th. So, you know, you can go on and on and on with this. Like I say, I'm not going to just go through everything, but it's just sticking to that one area, you know, instead of moving box shapes all over the neck. You know, just stick in one area and try to visualize different arpeggios and scales in that area without moving, okay? One last tip that you can get from working with this E flat 7 down there is that you can actually move that whole position to other parts of the neck. So let's say that we were playing a G7, okay? So we've got a G7 chord. If we were in a position, you know, the other parts of the bass line we were playing were in such a position that we landed the first finger on the G there, you know, we're not down here, we're not up here, we're actually here, and that G is there, instead of jumping down to get to the familiar G down here, or the G up here, because the first finger falls there, we can use the same pattern that we used for the E flat 7, you know, this one, we can just move that whole thing up to the G. So we have, okay, so that's a G7 there. And, you know, you can get used to that, get a bit of practice there by playing the riff there. Okay, so it's just a way of being able to, no matter where you are on the neck, you can always grab a note. You always want to be able to just grab a note with any of the fingers and then work from that and stay in that position. Like I said earlier about staying in one position, you know, you're not always going to be in that position. You might be in another position, and you need to be able to, you know, operate in that position with whatever chord comes your way, okay? So this is just another way of getting around that, okay? So just try moving that 7 arpeggio. Here it is on A. Just try moving it around. Okay, hopefully that sheds a little light on how you can play a little more freely in keys like E flat. So remember to visit talkingbass.net and download the lesson material and subscribe for all that exclusive bass content. Okay? See you later!